flustered and more upset, and then this stranger comes along and picks him up out of the bar fight and takes him outside, and this is what happens after that. So here we go. Can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Marvellous.
No.
They both stood and quickly looked at the bodies around them. When they caught each other's glance, they shared a grin before the stranger turned to leave and nodded his head at Rick to indicate that he follow him. Rick went willingly, feeling he had made an ally in this newfound freedom. As he followed the man, he was able to notice just how big he was, at least a foot taller than himself and massively broad in his back and shoulders. Stepping over the men lying on the floor, they made their way outside onto a deserted street. It was still pouring with rain, and they immediately felt large, heavy drops falling on their heads and faces. Suddenly, Rick didn't know what to say. Standing with this man in the rain, he was looking at Rick expectantly. As Rick was about to speak, the man in front of him, wearing a very tight, wet black t-shirt, said, "Did you enjoy that, Rick?" His voice said. Rick thought for a moment. Had he enjoyed it? Hurting all his friends, that fire and mania filling his veins. He had liked it. He'd loved it. "Yeah, I did. A lot," he said. The man nodded and looked up to the sky, closing his eyes as rain pelted his face. He took a deep breath and then looked at Rick again. "I have an offer for you from a very powerful man that I work for, and it'd be in your best interest to seriously consider what I'm about to ask you." "What kind of offer is it?" asked Rick. He saw a shadow pass over an alley across the road, and then another next to his shoulder, and then another behind the man in front of him. His eyes began darting around, trying to catch all the figures moving in the dark. The man within, however, stood motionless, unaffected by their guests, and continued. "I'm kind of like a recruiter. The man I work for is a fan of yours, admires your skills and your passion for rage. He would like very much for you to join his army and his family. As I said before, he's very powerful and can offer you anything you desire." As he said the words, a small sadness passed over his face. Then Rick saw them. The shadows were now taking steps toward them, men and women in dark clothes. Many with very strange haircuts, scars and piercings began taking slow steps toward the pair. Their faces were expressionless as the rain poured down upon them all. Rick looked at them. There were now about 30 or so, creating a circle around him and his new friend. He looked back at the man in front of him. "What's the catch?" The man looked at the faces and then back to Rick. "The power recruiting you, Rick, will own you. You'll become part of an army with these people that are now around us, as well as thousands more. You'll have respect, a family, power and a purpose, but you have to do what you're told and when you're summoned to do it." Rick digested the information. Swallowing, he glanced around at the people again, all smiling with their arms around each other. They looked happy and very together. He looked at the man in front of him and said, "I'm in." The man nodded and waved his hand in the air, indicating for the people to come forward. Suddenly Rick was grabbed by the arms by two strong men and pulled down to his knees. He was fighting and struggling against them. "What the bloody hell are you doing?" he yelled. But the man had turned his back to this ritual taking place. Rick was trying to stand and break free, but they held fast, and his head was bent forward from behind. He felt the rain hitting the skin of his neck, and suddenly the large group of people around him were whooping and hollering excitedly, clapping and shouting and whistling. Suddenly Rick felt he was centre stage at a concert or a football match, surrounded by hooligans. And then he felt it, or more, began to smell it. A branding iron was placed on the back of his neck, with an indescribable heat and scorching pain hitting him so hard that he slumped forward in too much shock to cry out. As he became almost used to that feeling, it was gone, and the shouting and screaming raised to a fever pitch, and he was pulled up into hugs and pats on the back. He looked up and saw everyone in the group had a tattoo or brand on their necks. It was a large V, and that was what he now had. He belonged to this small pack. He smiled so wide his cheeks hurt and accepted high fives and hugs greedily from the group. The rain had started letting up now, and a soft drizzle showered them as they celebrated. Rick looked through the small crowd to find the man that had come to his aid and offered him his life. He was standing away from the commotion and had pulled his hair into a loose ponytail and slipped on a dark leather jacket. "Hey mate, how can I thank you?" asked Rick, holding out his hand. The man took it and grinned. I'm just a recruiter, it's just my job, he replied. Then he let go of Rick's hand and turned to leave. Wait, said Rick. The man stopped and turned to him. Why don't you have the same brand on your neck? He asked. The man looked down and answered, because no one owns me. I don't belong anywhere anymore. He turned away again, and Rick suddenly felt sorry for him and shouted, well, what's your name? Without turning away, the man shoved his hands into his pockets and said, my name is Shy. Ah.